If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? Welcome to the real estate only edition of the Ron and Don Show. We are back in the Team Lisa with a Y.com studios. Team Lisa with a Y.com for all your mortgage needs. It's Team Lisa with a Y. Ron and Don sitdown.com if you want to sit down with us. Never drink a carbonated beverage before going live on tape. Ron's here. Hi, Ron. How are you?
Hello. Welcome to the Real Estate Only episode. So, Fortune magazine just came out with the Fortune 500 list. They do this every year. It's very famous. I'm sure you've heard of it before. And so I did one of those things where you get you buy something and they're like, hey, would you like a free magazine subscription along with your purchase? And I was like, why not try it out? So I got Fortune magazine and Sports Illustrated. Oh, wow. And so I'm reading my Fortune and something jumped out at me and I wanted to overlay it with you on the real estate market. So this is not something that Fortune talked about, but as I read through it, it made me curious, and I went down the rabbit hole on this. So when you look at the Fortune 500, one thing jumped out at me as I'm going down the list is that Washington is the only state in the country, Don, that has 3 out of the top 15 companies in the Fortune 500. And so as I was going down this list, I was like, wow, Amazon's number 1 this year, Microsoft's number 11, Costco's number 13. And then I looked down the list again, and I was like, there's 2 other states that have 2 in the top 15. California has Apple at number 4 and Alphabet at number 5, which is the parent company of Google. And then Texas has McKesson at number 8 and ExxonMobil at number 9. In every other state, we have 9 total Fortune 500 companies, but 3 in the top 15. And so intuitively, I was like, well, I wonder if you add up these top 3, how many on the bottom that would consume? Like, in other words, is being number 1, 11, and 13, how big of a deal is that? And then we'll get to how this impacts real estate in a minute. And so I did some math. And so if you combine the market value of these 3 companies, Amazon, Microsoft, and Costco, the valuation of those 3 is nearly $6 trillion, so $5.9 trillion. That is about the same as if you combine all of the Fortune bottom 250. So 251 to 500 is right around $6 trillion, and the combined value of the top 3 is $6 trillion. And so to illustrate this a little more, which is interesting when you start to think about this in terms of how it's going to impact housing, how it's going to impact the real estate market, is I did a tale of 2 companies in their valuations, Walmart versus Microsoft. So Walmart does almost double the sales that Microsoft does. The Walmart sales for last year, it was $681 billion. The Microsoft sales were $282 billion, so double. The valuation of Walmart is $800 billion, but the valuation of Microsoft is $2.82 trillion. So it does less sales, but 3x the valuation. And so as I was reading into this, and this is where it's going to impact real estate for me real quick. Walmart, they talk about, has 2.1 million employees. Most of them are hourly. So most of them are going to be store associates. They're going to be truck drivers. They're going to be people working on loading and unloading things, stocking shelves, doing all that stuff. So many employees, but they're hourly employees. Whereas Microsoft has around 100,000 restricted stock unit engineers. And so this type of employee is vastly different from this type of employee. So before I jump into the real estate angle on this, any thoughts on that setup? So the Fortune 15, we're the only state that has 3.
Well, and I think the big driver is if you look at the Fortune 7, like the top 7, 8 companies, that's all being driven by AI. So for instance, today, there's supposed to be a vote that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, worked on. And they said, hey, let's get together and create a bill. Let's come up with some ideas for affordable housing. One of those ideas is we're going to stop these these big firms from raising money and going in and buying up a bunch of our housing stock and then either flipping it or owning it or renting it out, forcing appreciation on that. So that had bipartisan support. And then the president on Truth Social today said, I'm going to veto that until some of my other legislation, which restricts voting, which he's very concerned about, the midterms. He's like, yeah, we're going to punt on housing right now. So we're not going to improve housing until we get this midterm election figured out.
The interesting thing in Washington State, less than 1% of homes is owned by corporations.
Yeah. So with him saying that, and then with the war in Iran and the things that have happened previously, he keeps touting the stock market, the stock market, the stock market. And you've just illustrated beautifully the stock market right now. It really is the us and thems. And it is people who are very wealthy that are becoming just ultra wealthy because they have an opportunity before these IPOs hit. And you and I saw this when we lived in San Francisco, and we did a couple stories for CNET down there. And we were down there when the .com bubble burst. It'll be interesting to see what happens when this bubble bursts and if it will take housing with it. Because if it does, it'll make it more affordable like it did in 2008 through 2011, right? We saw a bubble burst there in the economy. And all of a sudden, even homes where I live on Queen Anne were sitting for 6, 7, 8 months. And you could buy a home up there at that time for less than $500,000. You certainly can't do that now. But everything in the stock market, a lot of it is being driven by tech. It's being driven by AI. And it's being driven by the fact that people in the future have placed a value on AI. And we don't know if that's going to come to fruition yet. So it'll be interesting to see when there's a correction, because there's going to be a correction. And it is not being, certainly the economy is not being driven by the Fortune 251 through the 500, which you hope it would be. Because
these
then
are still very large companies.
Yeah, it would mean that the economy would be a lot more stable and able to withstand what's going to happen when AI corrects.
So I want to run this through the lens of real estate and what it means in the Pacific Northwest specifically, because the real estate prices in Seattle are twice the national average. And then if you get over to the east side, even higher than that. So there's a very famous study called the Size Journal, where they talked about the geography in real estate. And the thing that they found, which we've talked about a lot over the years, but I never actually looked at the study, is when you're surrounded by water and steep slopes, so water and mountains, it raises home prices because there's nowhere for you to go. So when you look at Texas with two of these big companies in Texas, what happens with housing is that you just go out farther. Like you and I have a very good friend that we grew up with, Anthony, who's a weatherman in Houston. He got an acre house with a pool, and it's 3,000 square feet. I think he paid under $500,000 for that house. Why? Because he has a drive outside of Houston to get into work. And so when it comes time to make housing, you just go out to the next spot of land.
Yeah, that's Frisco, Texas. When you live in Dallas and you're like, Frisco they used to film Wild West shows out there, and now it's all this type of McMansion track housing.
Phoenix,
yep.
These sort of houses, Austin, Texas in some ways, even though housing is a little bit high there, you can just continue to grow your city. So when you have water and steep slopes, it's raising home prices. When you think about the Bay Area, very similar to the Pacific Northwest, where you're surrounded by water, and Seattle's even is like, it's a perfect storm there. You have the Puget Sound, Lake Washington, Lake Sammamish, and then right after that are mountains. And so you have
Cascades to the Olympics, yeah.
You have these constraints by geography that have caused prices to go up. So
and then you have Native American land as well.
So when you think about 100,000 people, this is just for Microsoft. Same thing applies to Amazon. Same thing applies to Facebook and Meta and Google and all these companies. When you have a bunch of restricted stock units, you're an engineer, you're an employee, you're not an hourly employee that's loading and unloading trucks or working a cash register at a Walmart. You are a white collar job, and they issue you these stock units. You can leverage yourself against your stock units to buy a house. And so we've seen this a lot. So when you're in this environment and you're an executive and you're like, hey, I just got awarded. I've known friends that worked at Amazon where he might get 5,000 stock units restricted awarded to him with a promotion. That's $1 million or something. He can't access it today. He has to fulfill the terms of the deal. But at the end of that rainbow is going to be a tremendous amount of stock. But you can go to a mortgage company. You can go to like Team Lisa with a Y. And you can say, hey, I have these stock units. Here's their value. It's tied up for the time being. Can I leverage those to buy a house? The answer is yes, you can. You can unlock some of that equity to buy a house. And that is why we see this tremendous value and competition, one of the reasons, in Washington State. So when people we've had this for years, of, these tech bros are ruining the economy. The tech bros, like they're taking over Capitol Hill. I want it to go back to the good old days in Seattle. Think about this, because we have almost $6 trillion just in these three companies in our state. If you go and you look at a city, let's say like Detroit, or you look at a city like Cleveland, that back in the day had the biggest companies in America. You had Ford, you had GM, you had automotive manufacturing, you had this huge industrial revolution happening in the middle of the country. Those economies now have shrunk, and the populations have shrunk by 60, 70%. Their economies, they would mortgage their future to get one of these type of companies to move to Detroit. And so that leads to all sorts of other problems. So when I look at this is the boat that we're in. You can be grateful for it or you can criticize it, but this is where things stand right now. Is we have the only state in America with 3 of the top 15. It's a valuation that is the rest of the Fortune 500, 250 and below combined to reach that valuation. And we have a lot of people here that get restricted stock units that are driving up the price of housing, and they can afford to buy those houses in the sought after neighborhoods.
Yeah. It'll be interesting with these companies, as the middle, because what this is showing is it's just showing that the middle class is disappearing. It begs the question: what kind of leverage can you hand your children? We see parents, grandparents doing that now. Usually, you hand them leverage in the form of, hey, here's $300,000. I was going to give you this when I'm dead, but you probably need it now to buy a house. It's really going to be those politicians that see this. Like you see Mondani last night. I think he had 3 different politicians that he endorsed, and they all won in their primaries. And people want to label him as socialist, but I think what people are hearing when they see him, and I think it's one of the reasons why we have the current mayor that we have here in Seattle, is she kept talking about affordable housing. So as we head toward the midterm, that's going to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I think for the current president to just burn it all down today, he just burned it. He does not care about his party. But he does not care about us. He does not care about middle housing.
I read through the provisions of that bill, though. None of them would move the needle in Seattle.
Right.
None of the provisions.
Yeah.
Because some of it was like FHA loans.
Yeah.
The corporations owning, which we don't have that issue here. Mm-hmm. I've done 2 FHA deals in the entire time we've been in real estate. Like FHA buyers are just not buying in Queen Anne. That's just not happening in Bellevue. You don't roll up onto a house in Newport Hills and use your FHA loan. So like a lot of these programs and incentives that they're providing in that bill are made for the Sun Belt. They're not made for the West Coast or the East Coast.
It's the politicians out there, though, that are going to be able. The housing, healthcare, affordability. It's not about the war over there. It never is. It goes back to James Carville telling Clinton, hey, if you want to win, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, it's the economy, it's the economy. It's all about the economy. And I think as we head toward the midterms, that is going to continue to be the song that politicians need to sing. I do find it really interesting when you look at other parts of the country and they're like, Gasoline is so expensive here. It's $3.96 a gallon. Homes are so expensive here. They're $277,000. We have just got used to paying $6 or $7 in gasoline because we don't have state income tax. And then we're just like $1 million home is normal here now. It's just normal. And that is not normal in other parts of the country. It's interesting to see. One of the things I don't love is a lot of our clients move away, but it is interesting to see them unlock all the money in their home here and move somewhere else.
Just buy something cash.
Buy something in cash, and then they have a great life that they can fund because of selling their home. But for many of them, they would never be able to sell here and buy here unless they severely downsized. So we see that quite a bit. Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ron and Don Show. Don't forget, if you need us, we'd love to sit down with you. You just go to ronanddonsitdown.com, and we can sit down virtually with you today and talk about your aspirations. And it is never too early to talk about your real estate. So here we are in the summer, heading into summer of 2026, and you're like, well, I'm thinking about selling in the fall of 2027. We should be talking right now. What are the things that you can do to bring your house to market, save a lot of money, make sure that it's turnkey, and you spend $1, you get $2 back? We see a lot of people sometimes spending their money on the wrong things that you don't get back in the sale. And it drives me nuts. Like, people don't want to spend, and it's not a lot of money to change out all the lighting in your house. It's 20 years old. Just by changing the lighting in your house, it's 20 years old, on $1 million property, if you spend $5,000 on that lighting, it might be worth $50,000 more. But people get focused on the wrong things. Or when it comes to staging, they're like, yeah, I want to find the cheapest stager money can buy. Or we have discussions with people all the time that don't want to stage. Staging wins the day. Sometimes you put $100,000 more in your pocket because you stage the house versus not staging the house, right? So staging, getting those pictures when the home is staged. For homes that linger on the market, sometimes you don't stage in perpetuity, but you have to initially stage, get those pictures so people can see how you can live, work, and play in that property. Super important to do that. And then also net proceeds. Like, what does it cost to sell a house? Who do I have to pay? Where do the taxes go? That's where someone like Ron is great, because we can plug all that into a computer. We can do it with our mortgage company as well, and we can also do it with Team Lisa with a Y. So teamlisawithany.com for all your mortgage needs. ronanddonsitdown.com. We'd love to sit down with you today. He's Ron. I'm Don. Matt, thanks for producing today's show. My son, thanks for being our voice. Charlie, thanks for being our dog. Till next time, keep your head up and your shoulders back. And don't forget that you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show only on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.